For as long as I can remember, Windows has been my comfort zone. The interface, the workflow, the muscle memory developed over years of clicking, dragging, and juggling multiple tasks, it simply works for most people. There is a sense of familiarity with Windows that is difficult to articulate unless you've spent years immersed in it. Yet at the same time, Linux always tugged at my curiosity from the sidelines. The freedom it offers, the level of control, the underlying philosophy, the notion that my computer should truly belong to me, not some corporation dictating what I can or cannot do. That internal conflict lingered for years until curiosity eventually took over. Instead of picking a side, I asked myself a different question. What if Linux could deliver that Windows feeling without compromising? What makes it special? That question launched me into an unexpected journey. I began testing every Windows-like Linux distribution I could get my hands on. Not merely to see if they functioned, but to determine if they felt natural. I wasn't fixated on appearances alone. I wanted familiarity, reliability, and that subtle comfort you only recognize when it's absent. My aim wasn't to abandon Windows entirely, but to discover a middle ground between comfort and freedom in an era increasingly influenced by open technology and user-focused computing. The exploration started with Linux Mint, the obvious entry point for anyone transitioning from Windows. It has built a reputation for being approachable, dependable, and user-friendly. And honestly, that reputation holds up. I installed it on an aging laptop, and the installation process was straightforward and quick. From the moment it booted up, it felt recognizable. The Cinnamon desktop featured a taskbar, a start menu style launcher, and an arrangement that immediately made sense. It felt like a system designed with consideration for where I was coming from. For everyday tasks, Mint performed admirably. Web browsing, email, media consumption, software, installation, everything functioned smoothly. But reality set in once I attempted to fully integrate it into my daily routine. Several applications I relied on simply weren't available natively. Wine and Play on Linux provided some assistance, but results were hit or miss. Some programs ran flawlessly, others crashed unexpectedly, and a few flatly refused to launch. That was my first genuine reminder that Linux, regardless of how familiar it appears, isn't Windows beneath the surface, still driven by curiosity. I moved forward to Zorin OS, a distribution that openly positions itself as a Windows alternative. My expectations were elevated, and initially, Zorin lived up to them. The interface radiated Windows 10 vibes. The taskbar, start menu, and overall aesthetic felt immediately familiar. Customization was intuitive, and the system actively encouraged tinkering. I installed Chrome, Spotify, Slack, and productivity tools, and the majority functioned without issues. Wine integration exceeded my expectations, and for a brief moment, it seemed like I was approaching what I'd been searching for. However, imperfections gradually emerged. Keyboard shortcuts didn't always respond as anticipated. Notifications felt marginally out of place. Subtle graphical anomalies appeared when switching between virtual desktops. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to serve as reminders that I was mimicking Windows rather than actually using it. As Chimmy, past those minor inconsistencies began accumulating. I started questioning whether a Windows-like distribution should strive for flawless imitation or concentrate on being authentically Linux while simply smoothing the transition. That question accompanied me when I experimented with Kubuntu running KDE Plasma. On paper, it appeared ideal. KDE is robust, adaptable, and visually impressive. At first glance, it genuinely delivered. Animations were fluid, performance was solid, and the customization options were almost excessive. I invested hours adjusting panels, menus, and layouts to reconstruct my preferred Windows configuration. Eventually, that flexibility became problematic. KDE provides so many options that even straightforward modifications can become convoluted. I found myself lost in settings menus, attempting to impose familiarity instead of appreciating the system naturally. Stability was generally acceptable, but sporadic freezes and crashes served as reminders that no distribution is perfect. A pattern was becoming clear. Every Windows-like Linux distribution involved compromises between comfort and authenticity. At this stage, the search had become somewhat personal, like someone testing different options to find the perfect fit. Nothing felt exactly right. Linux Mint was stable, but restricted by compatibility challenges. Zorin was refined, but imperfect. Kubuntu was visually stunning, but overwhelming. I wondered whether a distribution could genuinely capture the essence of Windows. Rather than merely replicating its appearance, That curiosity drove me toward less conventional choices. I experimented with elementary OS, despite its stronger resemblance to Mac OS design principles. The system was clean, minimalist, and polished. But regardless of how much I adjusted it, it never felt like Windows. The file manager, task switching, and overall workflow felt unfamiliar. It reinforced important realization. Visual design alone isn't sufficient. Behavior and interaction patterns matter just as much as aesthetics. Next came Peppermint OS, a lightweight and responsive distribution built around simplicity. With sufficient customization, it could superficially resemble Windows at a glance, but its constraints quickly became apparent. Resource-intensive applications struggled, gaming performance was underwhelming, and complex workflows felt restricted. Peppermint underscored another reality. Windows benefits from decades of software compatibility development, while Linux, even with tools like Proton and Wine, still has noticeable gaps. Then I explored Manjaro, an Arch-based distribution with a KDE desktop that could be configured to feel very Windows-like. It was responsive, contemporary, and capable, but it also came with rolling updates and occasional system instability. For someone accustomed to Windows predictability, that uncertainty could be concerning. Nevertheless, this came close to so far in delivering both raw performance and visual familiarity. I even tried Linuxfx, a distribution explicitly marketed as a Windows replica with comprehensive Wine integration and Windows-style helper utilities. Conceptually, it sounded perfect. In practice, it felt awkward. Automations sometimes created problems instead of solving them. Updates triggered issues. And the system felt more like a superficial disguise than a genuine experience. It reinforced the lesson that forcing Linux to behave like Windows often results in instability. After evaluating nearly a dozen distributions, I was mentally drained but significantly more knowledgeable. I recognized that my objective wasn't to suppress Linux's identity or mindlessly recreate Windows. I wanted equilibrium, familiar patterns, dependable workflows, and Linux's inherent freedom all coexisting harmoniously. And then I discovered it. KDE Manjaro Windows Edition transformed everything. It wasn't flashy or heavily promoted, but it genuinely understood Windows users. Installation was seamless. The interface felt intuitive. The start menu, taskbar functionality, window management, everything aligned with years of ingrained habits. More significantly, it was consistent. I wasn't perpetually adjusting settings or battling the system. It simply functioned as expected. For the first time, I felt confident about making the switch without reservation. I retained all the Linux advantages: powerful package management, performance optimization, extensive customization, and controls shaped by the modern open technology landscape of 2026. But I didn't feel disoriented. I didn't feel like a visitor in my own operating system. This journey revealed that searching for a Windows-like Linux distribution isn't purely technical. It's emotional. It involves identity, comfort, and trust. Some individuals prioritize absolute freedom. Others value familiarity. Most of us desire balance. Understanding what matters to compatibility, stability, visual design, or control is more important than endlessly chasing the supposedly perfect distribution. Ultimately, no Linux distribution will ever truly replicate Windows, and that's perfectly acceptable. Linux is Linux, but with the appropriate balance, it can feel sufficiently familiar to welcome Windows users without compromising its core strengths. For me, KDE Manjaro Windows Edition achieved that elusive balance. It didn't merely resemble Windows visually, it respected how Windows users think, work, and navigate through a system while still delivering the freedom that initially drew me to Linux. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.